Everyone tells you focus on yourself, build your life. You don't need anyone. But when I tell divorced Christian women to build intimacy with God, I get the same response every time. That seems so lonely. Here's what's actually happening. You're rejecting the one relationship that would fill what you're desperately seeking from everyone else. Today, I'm showing you what feels like exile is actually God's invitation to intimacy, and why both the woman chasing connection and the woman cutting it off are running from the same thing. Hey, friend, welcome to Beyond Believing. I am Katie Ann, a certified life coach and a woman of God called to walk alongside divorced Christian women rebuilding their lives with Him. This is part one in our Abiding in the Lord series. Today, I'm sharing why building a relationship with God feels lonely and what that reveals about how you're measuring love. If you're filling every quiet moment to avoid being alone with God, or if you've shut down completely because vulnerability feels too dangerous, I have limited spots in Selah Healing. Details at coachkatieann.com/call. Let's dive in. Today, I'm showing you three things. First, why abiding with God feels lonely and what Jeremiah's exiles teach us about building in a season that feels like isolation. Second, what John 15 and 1 John 4 reveal about making your heart at home in God's love instead of measuring it by worldly standards. And third, how to shift from experiencing God's presence as emptiness to experiencing it as the intimacy you've been craving or rejecting from everyone else. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why exile with God is better than comfort without Him and how to actually experience it. Now, let me tell you what I see every week. Two women, same wound, opposite responses. The chaser says, I'm already alone so much. I just want to talk to someone. I want human connection, not just spiritual connection. Sitting with God feels empty. I need people. She's lying in bed at 11 p.m., scrolling through his social media, texting that guy who doesn't even honor God, calling her friend for the third time today, anything to avoid the silence. She's running from solitude because it feels like abandonment. The cutoff says, I don't need anyone. I'm fine on my own. I have been hurt enough. I am not opening my heart again. People are unreliable. I'll just rely on myself. She has filled her calendar so tightly there's no space to think. Work, kids, errands, TV, sleep, repeat. Because if you slow down, you'll feel it. All of it. She's running from vulnerability because it feels like danger. But here's what both women share. They're avoiding the very place where God wants to meet them. One seeks connection everywhere except with God, and the other refuses connection with anyone, including God. But both are running from the same thing, true intimacy. Post-divorce already feels like exile. Lonely, displaced, like you've lost your place in the world. So when I tell you to abide with God, the chaser hears, be even more alone. The cutoff hears, let your guard down again. But that's because you're both defining exile, loneliness, and love from a worldly perspective and not a biblical one. So let me show you the first thing I need you to understand. And this is point number one, that Jeremiah's exiles built in what feels like isolation. But here's what God told the exiles before He told them He had plans to prosper them. Jeremiah 29, 4-7 says, build houses and settle down. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. He said, build, plant, settle down, pray, not wait for rescue, not sit in your pain, build. These people felt isolated from their community, displaced from their home, separated from everything familiar, abandoned by God. Sound familiar? That's exactly how you feel post-divorce. And friend, that's exactly what He's telling you right now. The chaser hears this and thinks, great, I'll build relationships with others. The cutoff hears this and thinks, I am building my life. But God's not talking about building with people. He's talking about building with Him. God doesn't say, sit in isolation and wait for me to change your circumstances. He says, thrive in the place I've put you because I am there with you. The chaser is looking for human validation to fill the void. The cutoff is looking for achievement to replace intimacy. But here's the truth. The exile isn't the problem. The problem is believing exile means God is absent. 1 John 4:13 says, "This is how we know that we live in him and he in us. He has given us of his spirit. He's not distant. He's dwelling in you." If you're the chaser, are you dwelling in him or dwelling in the validation of others? If you're the cutoff, are you dwelling in him or are you dwelling in your own self-protection? Now, in Selah Healing, this is one of the frameworks I teach. How to stop building your identity with people and achievements and start building it with God. Because until you learn this, everything stays stuck. Which brings me to the second thing you need to understand, which is point number 2, making yourself at home. John 15:9 in the Message version says, "Make yourselves at home in my love." Not visit occasionally, not check in when you're desperate. Make yourself at home. What does that mean? When you're at home, you don't perform, you don't pretend, you don't earn your place, you just exist comfortably, safely, fully. And that's what God is inviting you into. Here is what making yourself at home actually looks like. Each morning I sit with my broth and my Bible. And yes, I just said broth, no agenda. I used to follow a really structured reading plan, but lately I've been reading through the poetic books. There's no obligation. No, I need to hear from God about any specific thing. I'm just being. And here's what I realized. I am comfortable, safe, no longer performing. I'm not trying to feel something. I am just home. That's what he's inviting you into. But here's why it feels lonely, because you're still measuring love by worldly standards. The chaser measures love by physical presence. I need someone here. Constant communication. I need someone to hear me. Someone chasing her. I need to feel wanted. External validation. I need proof I matter. So when she sits with God and there's no text or person or voice she can audibly hear, she feels alone. The cutoff measures love by past pain. She thinks love always hurts. By betrayal, she thinks people always leave. Self-protection. She thinks the only love that's safe is no love. Control. If I don't open up, I can't get hurt. So when God invites her to abide, she hears, lower your guard and get hurt again. But God's love is different. It's spiritual presence. Hebrews 13:5 says he's always with you. It's divine communication. He's always speaking. You just haven't learned his voice yet. He pursued you first. Romans 5:8 says, well, you were still a sinner. By internal transformation, not dependent on anyone's opinion. By perfect love. 1 John 4:18, which drives out fear. If you're the chaser, you're rejecting God's love because it doesn't look like what you're used to. If you're the cutoff, you're rejecting God's love because you're afraid all love will hurt like human love did. I have 2 clients. Both responded to the same invitation completely differently. And when I invited each of them separately to be still with God, they both said the exact same words. That seems so lonely. Same invitation, same initial response. But what happened next was completely different. The chaser turned away from the opportunity. She chose to connect physically with men instead, and she stayed in the same cycle. Temporary relationships, temporary relief from her loneliness, only to continue feeling lonely even in the presence of the relationships she entered into. And she's still lonely, still seeking, still empty, even when she's with someone. She was seeking connection everywhere except the one who could actually fill it. The cutoff, however, responded with a question. What do I do when I feel like I don't hear him? And then she did the work to figure it out. Now she's experiencing the genuine peace, comfort, confidence, and clarity that he promises because she was willing to be uncomfortable with the idea of being alone in a worldly sense in order to build her intimacy with God. She's now more clearly seeing who he says she is. She's stepping into that identity. And as she says, I'm running after Jesus now, full of his joy. Both women, same invitation from God. Different choices, different outcomes. This is exactly what we work on in Selah Healing, learning to make your heart at home in God's love instead of measuring it by worldly standards. Because one path leads to more emptiness and the other, fullness you've never experienced. So here's the third thing, and this is where everything shifts. Point number 3, 1 John 4 and perfect love. John 4:16 through 18 says, "And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear." The chaser needs to rely on God's love first, not seek it from people and settle for God as backup. Listen, when you rely on God's love, you stop seeking validation from your ex. You stop settling for attention from men who don't honor you. You stop measuring your worth by whether people choose you, because perfect love drives out the fear of being unloved. The cutoff needs to receive God's love, not protect herself from all love because human love failed. When you receive God's love, you stop believing all love will hurt. You stop armoring up against intimacy. You stop equating vulnerability with danger, because perfect love drives out the fear of being hurt. Now, here's what I want you to see. Both of you, whether you're chasing or cutting off, are operating from fear. The chaser fears, I won't be loved. The cutoff fears, I'll be hurt again. And 1 John 4:18 says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear." Not reduces fear, not helps with fear, drives it out. The chaser, you fear being unloved. Perfect love drives that out. The cutoff, you fear being hurt. Perfect love drives that out. Your ex's love, imperfect. A future partner's love, imperfect. Your own self-protection, imperfect. Only God's love is perfect. And when you abide there, fear does not stand a chance. Jeremiah's exiles learned this. They built, they planted, they thrived, not because exile ended, but because they learned to thrive with God in the exile. For the chaser, stop seeking connection everywhere except with the one who will never leave. For the cutoff, stop protecting yourself from the one who will never hurt you. For the chaser, instead of thinking time alone with God feels lonely because I'm not with people. For the cutoff, instead of thinking I don't need more intimacy with God, I'm fine protecting myself. These create suffering because you're measuring God's love by worldly standards. You're seeking validation externally or rejecting it entirely. You're avoiding the intimacy God is offering. Instead, you can believe time with God is where I experience the perfect love I've been seeking from imperfect people, or protecting myself from because people failed me. So what evidence do you have to believe this? Psalm 73:25 says, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you." John 15:9 says, "Make yourselves at home in my love." And 1 John 4:18, perfect love drives out fear. The result? You stop measuring God's presence by worldly standards, and you start experiencing intimacy that fills what people never could, and safety that fear never protected. In Selah Healing, I see this transformation constantly in both archetypes. The chasers come to me desperate for human connection, measuring God's love by whether people show up, filling every quiet moment because being alone feels unbearable. The cutoffs come to me armored up, self-sufficient to a fault, believing they don't need anyone, including God's intimacy, because needing people is what got them hurt. And through our work together, through learning to abide, to make their hearts at home in God's love, to measure intimacy by His standards, not the world's, both discover something shocking. They are more fulfilled in solitude with God than they ever were seeking validation from people or protecting themselves from all connection. The chaser stops seeking and starts receiving. The cutoff stops protecting and starts trusting. Not because they become hermits, but because they've learned the language of divine love. And once you know that language, everything changes. You stop seeking validation from people who cannot give it, protecting yourself from the one who won't hurt you, measuring love by worldly standards, avoiding the very place God wants to meet you. And you start experiencing God's presence as fullness, not emptiness, making your heart at home in His love, thriving in what used to feel like exile. That's what we do in Selah Healing. If you're exhausted from filling the void with everything except God, or if you're exhausted from protecting yourself from everyone, including true intimacy with God, book your call at coachkatieann.com/call. This work requires stillness, surrender, and willingness to let God rewrite your definition of love. But if you're ready, you are ready. Friend, what you're calling loneliness, God calls intimacy. For the chaser, the connection you're seeking from people, God's offering it first. For the cutoff, the protection you're maintaining through isolation, God's offering safety through intimacy. The exile you're in, it's not punishment. It's where God's teaching you to abide. 1 year from now, you could be the woman who says, I'm running after Jesus full of his joy. Or you could still be seeking connection from people who cannot fill you, or protecting yourself from the one who won't hurt you. The choice is yours, but the invitation is already extended. And when you make your heart at home in his love, when you stop measuring his presence by worldly standards, you'll discover you were never alone at all. Jeremiah's exiles learned to thrive in the exile, not after it, and you can too. Your time with God isn't isolation, it's invitation. Build, plant, thrive right where he's placed you. Next week in part 2, we're talking about access, why participation in anything gives the enemy access to your spirit, and how wisdom helps you discern what to engage with. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if you want help making your heart at home in God's love, go to coachkatieann.com/call. Thanks for listening to Beyond Believing. Have a great week, friends.